Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Inside Lowell Daily Pulse, the Thursday, February 19th edition. I think I have the right date of the Daily Pulse. I'm your host, Teddy Panos, coming to you from the Well Point Studios, joined today by my guest host, Lowell Board of Health member, Lowell City Council candidate in 2025. Erin Gendron is with us. How are you, Erin?
Doing well. Happy to be here.
Happy to have you here. We're gonna skip all the niceties and the sponsor reads because we've got a very important guest on a very tight schedule here, especially since I screwed up her Zoom meeting invite link. But the state auditor for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Diana DiZoglio, is joining us on the Zoom line. Good morning, Auditor DiZoglio. How are you?
Good morning, Teddy. It's great to be on Inside Lowell. Hello, Erin. Hello, everybody. Go Merrimack Valley strong. I'm always excited when I get to be on the radio in Lowell. Thank you for the opportunity.
Always great to have you here. I will point out for our audience that Erin, we tried to set up either Monday or Thursday this week. I gave her the choice of both days. And as soon as she found out you were going to be here today, she said, I'll take Thursday.
I ditched him on Monday as fast as I could.
I'm honored. Thank you, Erin.
So, all right. Well, as you always seem to be, you're in the news in a big way over the last week. You filed suit against legislative leaders in the House and the Senate for blocking your audit, which was overwhelmingly approved by the voters. And as far as anybody could tell, is law, except our Attorney General doesn't seem to want to enforce it. And now the courts are going to have to enforce it. Why now? Why, after a couple of years of trying to audit them and then a full year following the ballot question passing and this becoming law, why did you file suit now? Why not sooner? Why not later?
Yeah, so we needed to wait until we could get the Attorney General on record contradicting herself, essentially. The Attorney General was claiming at the beginning of this that she was unable to enforce the law, that she just needed more information from my office, that we weren't clear about the scope of our audit. And she was making all sorts of allegations towards the Office of State Auditor to essentially give herself permission to not do her job and not enforce the law. And respectfully, the Attorney General has the power to sue whoever she wants. She sues the president all the time. You're not going to tell me that the Attorney General can't sue legislative leaders like the Senate President and Speaker because I somehow am getting in her way from being able to do that. It's just a ridiculous argument. So we've had to deal with the Attorney General gaslighting our office and blaming us for her inaction, essentially, and trying to get away with saying, oh, she supposedly supported this and she supports the audit, but, if that auditor would just get out of the way, I could do my job and sue. All due respect, no, that is a bogus argument. It's completely false. And she has every right as our top attorney of the Commonwealth, our chief law enforcement officer, to enforce this law and to make sure that the Senate President and the Speaker are law abiding and that they are fulfilling the will of the voters. And it's her responsibility to make sure that this actually goes enforced, but she's refused to do so. So we, according to law, Teddy, we have to go through the Attorney General's office in order to be able to actually get access to court. However, the Attorney General is making herself unavailable by not pursuing this in court and by not allowing us to get our own attorney. So we needed to wait essentially until we had enough on the record with us answering all of her questions, her repeatedly asking us the same questions over and over again, her contradicting herself in writing from her office, saying essentially that we hadn't answered questions when we in fact had, and it was on the record that we had, and make the case to be able to bring it to court to ask a judge to afford us the right to an attorney of our choosing, despite the Attorney General's unwillingness to do her job. So that's why not earlier. Unfortunately, the way that the law is set up, we're supposed to go through the AG's office. We had to wait until we had enough ammo, so to speak, to be able to go to court and say, this is clearly the Attorney General refusing to do her job, and this is not a question of us not answering questions. And we're asking the courts to require that she does her job, that she lets us get our own attorney, and that's why we're going to court now. So wish us all the luck in the world, because we're going to need it.
What will this cost the taxpayers of Massachusetts in order to do it? 72% want it, so it seems worth the cost, but what will the cost to the taxpayers be?
Yeah, it shouldn't cost the taxpayers anything. Shame on the Speaker and Senate President for breaking the law and making this be even necessary to go to court. We are essentially getting pro bono work from Shannon Liss Reardon on this issue, so long as a judge approves her as being our selected Special Assistant Attorney General. Some folks might remember Attorney Shannon Liss Reardon. She actually ran for Attorney General during the last election cycle. She was a Democratic candidate for Attorney General. I got to know her during that race, and subsequently had been able to meet her and get to know her a little bit more after I was elected as state auditor. She came to me and said, I'd be happy to represent your office, but you and I both know that it's very unlikely that the Attorney General is going to appoint me. So we are hoping that the judge, seeing that the Attorney General is refusing to represent us, has refused to appoint other attorneys that we have brought to the Attorney General seeking her assistance in appointing those people, that the judge will go ahead and just appoint Shannon Liss Reardon to represent us, because Shannon Liss Reardon is willing to do this at no cost to the taxpayers. It does need to be said, I'm very grateful to Attorney George Vienne, Esquire, who offered to do this, and Mike Minogue was willing to pay for this, but the Attorney General essentially was turning that offer into a distraction and essentially targeting Attorney Vienne and targeting our representation on that front, and trying to allege that it was unethical for them to be able to represent us, even though we got clearance from the State Ethics Commission. So we said, you know what, for this next phase of going to court, we're just going to ask the judge to appoint Shannon Liss Reardon. Certainly the AG has no, sensical way to object to Attorney Liss Reardon representing our office, and we're hoping the Attorney General will just essentially move out of the way, let us go to court, let us have our own attorney representing us, so that this law can get enforced. I think it's important, Erin and Teddy, to say that the legislature essentially and the Attorney General keep saying that we haven't laid out the scope of our audit. With all due respect, the argument that we're bringing to court is about the legislature's refusal to give us basic financial receipts and state contracts. If you hear anybody saying that we haven't said what we want access to, that we haven't been clear, just understand those are bogus arguments and nothing but excuses. We've been precisely clear, actually, about exactly what we want. We have it in writing on multiple occasions to all parties, stating that we are seeking financial receipts and information pertaining to state contracts. That's it. You would think that we were asking for personal text messages. You would think that we were inserting ourselves into the business of the legislature. We're not. We're just asking for those financial receipts and state contracts right now for the sake of moving this audit forward. And it's very unfortunate to hear some who want to be able to make excuses for why this isn't being done suggest that we're trying to look at things that we're not trying to look at, or suggest that we haven't been very clear about our requests. To be clear, we haven't received one financial taxpayer-funded receipt from state legislative leaders, and those are the types of documents we're requesting. If I called the city of Lowell and I asked your city manager, Tommy Golden, to send the receipts over as a resident of the Commonwealth, your city is actually required by law to release those taxpayer-funded receipts to any resident who requests that information, because they actually follow what's known as the public records law. And if they don't do that, they could be sued. They know this very well. That's why they follow the law. That's why my office follows the law, right? It is the law. We have to give you access. But the legislature actually exempts themselves from the state's public records law as well. So essentially, there's no way to get access. And this audit was, hopefully going to be one way we could get access to those taxpayer-funded receipts. And, they're just breaking the law. So I'm actually requesting of everybody that's watching today, everybody that's listening, please, please, please go to vote for an act to increase access to public records at the State House. You're going to have an opportunity to vote for this on your November ballot. What this will do, if you vote yes on this and it passes, is it will make the state legislature and the governor's office subject to the state's public records laws. We are the only state in the nation that allows the governor's office, the courts, and the legislature to exempt themselves from the state's public records laws. And this will make it so at least the governor's office and the legislature are subject. And so they have to release those financial receipts and administrative and business records to you, the tax-paying residents of the Commonwealth. And that's one additional way we can hold their feet to the fire. Look, they could try to break that law too, but you know what? Then they'll have the Boston Globe potentially suing them, the Boston Herald potentially suing them, InsideLowell potentially suing them, the Lowell Sun potentially suing them, because, you know, these media organizations very much want access to public records as well, so that they can do their jobs as journalists and, you know, get the word out there about what's happening in these institutions. And the legislature, they're going to have a lot more people to deal with than just me and my office when this public records question passes. So it's going to be one additional tool in our tool belt to make sure we have increased transparency from our elected leaders on Beacon Hill. And guys, this is basic stuff. This is basic stuff. Do not be fooled when you hear people tell you that, you know, the public records law would allow personal constituent emails to be blasted all over the media. That's just not true. There's an exemption. There's a privacy exemption for those constituent emails with legislators and their constituents about legislators asking them for assistance. Those things are exempt under this public records law. But what would be made available to the general public is email communications about how the tax dollars are being spent in their administrative and business records, is, you know, the communications about how their state contracts are given out based on procurement dealings, for example, about how they enter into contracts in the millions of our taxpayers' dollars. Those things would be a matter of public record. So, you know, these are basic records that are a matter of public record for every other state entity, for every city and town. And it's beyond past time that the legislature follow the same law that they enforce on everybody else.
And those are those bidding and procurement records are, I'm going to guess, exactly what they are trying to hide, because I'm not sure they exist or would paint a favorable light. How confident are you? The Attorney General is clearly not helping you. The legislature has fought you the whole time. The governor, while continuously saying she voted for this audit, isn't sticking her neck out to help put some pressure on. So you've turned to the courts. How confident are you the courts are going to kind of side with you, support you, based on the fact that even they are now saying they're not subject to audits that they have previously participated in until it kind of became inevitable that they were going to get caught in this battle?
Yeah, I think it's really unfortunate that the courts, Teddy, two courts, the appeals court and the trial court, Justice Heidi Brigger and Justice Amy Blake, sent almost identical letters to our office saying that they weren't going to follow the audit law anymore because the Attorney General was defending the legislature, and essentially, and I'm paraphrasing, you know, they wanted in on it, essentially, that they just didn't want to be audited anymore. And they found it apparently offensive that we wanted to look at their website accessibility for disabled persons and others who might have language barriers, for example. And they didn't think that we should have the right to look at their website, make recommendations for improvement. Frankly, we all need help with these types of things, right? I run an agency. If somebody wants to look at our website and help me out, I'm always saying, please, by all means. We've asked people to look and say, how can we make it more accessible? We need your help, right? We provide a service to these folks in doing these audits. We're not the FBI. You know, we don't go in and toss desks. We don't interfere with the business of these entities. We certainly would not interfere with the business of the courts. You know, the courts need to be able to do their jobs and hear cases and exercise the power of the bench. You know, we're just trying to go in and to look at some of these administrative functions and help to make government more accessible in some of these cases even. And they outright refuse to even let us look at their website, saying, well, you know, the Attorney General's not going to make us, so we're not going to be audited anymore. So see you later, you know, go pound sand, Auditor. And they didn't let us look at their websites. I think that that is ridiculous. And, you know, this is a new thing, Teddy. They've always been audited by the Office of State Auditor. We, in fact, audited the Supreme Judicial Court just, you know, within the last couple of years. So this is something new. My predecessor, Auditor Bump, she always audited the courts, and it was not a problem. If they had a disagreement about the scope of her audit, she would go in and work it out to make sure that everyone was aware that the auditors were going to stay in their lane. But, this was something that was always done. So I am, my confidence in the courts, unfortunately, due to this is at an all-time low. And I think that's very unfortunate because I know a lot of folks don't trust the judicial system right now to be able to operate on behalf of the people. It's hard to trust when you're suing Beacon Hill that when you go to court, you're going to get an impartial hearing because, as we know, judges are appointed by Beacon Hill, right? Now, there's nothing inherently just automatically wrong with that, of course, and people are allowed to have friends. People are allowed to know each other. It doesn't automatically insinuate that something wrong is going to occur, that, that this is the way things are done. But it does cause fear and trepidation, essentially, when you know that these folks are appointed by Beacon Hill and that some of them are now refusing to follow the audit law themselves. And you're the one taking the audit law to court and saying, please enforce this law on the legislature. So I do believe, Teddy, that there are good judges. I do believe that we have good justices. And I think it's important that we don't paint with a broad brush and say, everyone can't do their job or anything like that. We do have good justices, but I just hope that we get a good justice. I hope that we get someone that, wants to uphold these standards and wants to follow the law, and that they do right by the people of the Commonwealth. So it's a toss-up. We'll see what happens. And I'm just essentially living on a prayer right now that the justice, does the right thing and stands with the people. And I've heard, that if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, that you can move mountains, right? For those of us that were raised in church growing up. And so, I'm essentially taking my mustard seed and I'm heading to court and hoping for the best. But keep me in your thoughts and prayers because that's essentially all I have right now.
Sunshine on.
I know you have to run. I just quickly want to ask you, because you're battling in courts now, you're also battling in the court of public opinion. The people are on your side. I'm starting to pick up that they're trying to paint you as a Republican. Auditor DiZoglio, you won the Democratic nomination in a Democratic primary and convention, and then you won the general election. But now we're being told, well, all these Republicans are backing her. They're showing up to her rallies. Mike Minogue, as you mentioned, candidate for governor, offered to fund the lawsuit. And then this morning, my master list kind of went down that path as well. That, she's getting a lot of support from Republicans.
I'll speak to that, Teddy. Thank you. And then I'm going to jump right afterwards because I got a knock telling me we got to get in the car and go to Boston to the State House. But this is my response to that. Yes, I am a registered Democrat. I have a 10-year voting record that demonstrates just that. It's why I became the Democratic nominee for state auditor the first time around. And, I think that that's pretty clear for everybody, right? I think that the issue is that unfortunately partisan politics have gotten so out of control in recent years that it's become sort of shocking to people that Democrats and Republicans could possibly speak to one another, okay? Considering all of the partisanship that's going on at the federal level. And I get it. But as my Merrimack Valley supporters and friends know about me, just because I hold true to my values as a Democrat elected official does not mean that I'm not going to speak with Republicans across the aisle. I think that it is our duty as elected officials to represent the folks in our communities and cross party lines to work on issues that we can agree on. Do people agree with me from the Republican side of the aisle on everything? Certainly not. Certainly not. I did not vote for Donald Trump. I am no fan of Donald Trump or his politics, right? And I am transparent about that. But that doesn't mean that I'm not going to talk to somebody because they supported Donald Trump. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to sit down and talk about ways we can improve transparency and accountability up on Beacon Hill with somebody who's on the opposite side of the aisle. I think it's incumbent upon us as leaders in the community to keep our community together and to bring people together and build bridges, not burn bridges, with folks who are on the other side, to make sure that we're holding people in power to account, to the working class people who just want to seat at the table. This is not Democrat or Republican up on Beacon Hill. It's about power and then the rest of us, right? It's about people who have too much power and then the working class folks in our communities, like those right here in the Merrimack Valley, who just want to know that their elected officials can be trusted and that they're walking with integrity. I think people want to know that their officials are walking with integrity, and that's what we need to be focused on right now. So I will work together with whoever wants to work with me. If you're a Republican, if you're a Democrat, conservative, or liberal, look, I am running for re-election. I hope to have your support. I am doing this work on behalf of all of us, and I thank you in advance. I got a jet,
All right.
Teddy.
Thank
Great
you,
being on
Auditor.
with you, Erin, as well.
So nice
Take
talking
care,
to you.
everybody, and I'll see you around town. Thanks
All
so
right,
much. Bye-bye.
thanks so much. That is State Auditor Diana DiZoglio joining us here on today's Daily Pulse. We appreciate her taking the time out from her very busy schedule. She's got lots going on. She actually has to do her job. She has to fight lawsuits. Oh, and she's got a campaign as well, not just for herself, but for that ballot question she just told you about. Let me quickly thank my Daily Pulse sponsor, Ray Booten, a licensed realtor in Massey and New Hampshire, certified appraiser in both states as well. So if you're looking to buy or sell a home, a business, or a commercial property, get in touch with Ray today. You can find him online, realestaterayBooten.com. That's realestaterayBooten.com. I also want to thank our friends at WellPoint for hosting us here in the WellPoint studios. It's the only health plan offering healthcare benefits exclusively to Massachusetts GIC members. At WellPoint, your whole health is their whole point. Thank you, Ray. Thank you, WellPoint. I'll thank my other podcast sponsors in a little bit, but bringing back Erin Gendron here into the studios. All right, Erin, you got to at least meet and talk to the auditor. She's not afraid to hold back.
I know, best day ever.
What do you make of this whole legislative audit? Were you one of the folks who supported, one of the 72% of the folks who supported her right to audit?
Absolutely. As a state worker, I've been my every job I've had working for the state has been audited by the state auditor's office, and I think that it's a tool in your tool belt. I've been able to see on the worker side of it what real change happens when we get audited by the auditor's office. Just the most recent one, she was actually talking about the ADA compliance, and that was my agency had that one audited, and it showed that we had some work to do, right? And it was really cool because you could actually see in real time. So I think that one for us came out the summer of last year, and shortly after, you could see websites change and become more accessible. And that's a tool in your tool belt that creates change that is makes for more accessibility and more efficiency. So it's a good thing.
You would like to think our elected leaders would want to be transparent. I just find all these arguments they use against her. She touched on it, once she gets going on this topic, as you saw. But, the first thing they tried to stall this was, well, it's not constitutional. And yet the Attorney General's job before a ballot question gets on the ballot is to rule on its constitutionality. So she said it's constitutional. She put it on the ballot. And now all of a sudden they tried to fight on that ground. Now they're using all these different other types of arguments. But when you cut right down to it, 72% of the people said they want to give the auditor the right to audit the legislature, not some independent board, not some legislature selected board, not a citizen selected board. They want the auditor to do it. The residents have said, we want the auditor to do it. And they're fighting that to the point where now we're going to go to court. And I don't think it's going to turn out well for the auditor, just based on the fact that now you've got courts saying, well, we're not going to subject ourselves to audits that we have done both with you and all of your predecessors previously. Tell me I'm wrong. Give me some hope, please.
So I think the next step is something that is also plausible. It's going to take longer, but I mean, if 72% of people want it and it's a road to go down, like we've changed constitutionality before. The millionaires tax, that was, that changed part of our Massachusetts Constitution. So I think it's a longer road, but transparency is important.
You would think. Is this going to become a campaign issue in September in primary elections for state rep, state
Absolutely.
Senator in November? It hasn't really become an issue. I know the Republican candidate, Sam Meas, Joe Espinola, the unenrolled candidate, they're trying to make it an issue. Representatives Howard and Elliott, kind of tried to stay away from that, both voting with the speaker to not allow the audit.
Early election, though.
Early election.
Special election, a little different.
Right.
I have a hard time with if 72% of people said, this is what we want, I worry for the governor in her reelection campaign where it's voter math. Like, this is what we want. So if the first question is, the people wanted this and it's not happening, then how do we authentically go to the next question? So I just worry about.
Will voters make that their issue? I know the Republicans are trying like hell. Mike Minogue has offered to pay for it.
Right.
Both Mike Quignali and Brian Shortsleeve have. You're hearing it in some state reps, state senate races. I had a treasurer candidate on, Elizabeth Dion, the other day. She's trying to make it an issue. Will that be enough to break some of it? I don't anticipate the legislature flipping to suddenly become Republican here in Massachusetts, but will they get enough movement to maybe send a message? Because ultimately, I fear that the only thing our elected officials respond to is their reelection. They're so worried about getting reelected that they will, put that above everything else. And right now, the fear of not getting money for your district seems to be winning over the fear of not getting reelected.
Yeah. The lack of transparency just makes it feel like, what is in there? Like, what are you hiding that is worth, like, maybe not getting reelected? What is in there that, because wrong is wrong and right is right. Like, if you didn't follow the procurement laws and contracts were given to people that it shouldn't have, why are you exempt from following the laws that everyone else has to? Right? And I get it. Like, so all the other agencies are audited and their budget isn't like the legislative budget isn't the biggest of, right? Like, it's 90 million or so. So, like, that's not the biggest chunk of money that we're going to find all this fraud. But at the same time, like, are you following the rules? And that's what people want to know. It's just not like, if there's nothing to hide, open the books.
That's you said what I constantly say, what are they hiding? And then as little things are discovered, you have to ask, what else are they hiding? And, we didn't have enough time with the auditor this time, but we'll certainly invite her back in the future. But, as you see this federal battle play out over how are federal monies being spent and are they being spent in accordance with federal laws, one of the things I want to know is, will some of this fraud that the auditor has discovered a bunch of it. I know you wanted to talk a little bit about the SNAP benefit fraud, but she uncovered a bunch of it recently. I wonder how much more would she be able to uncover? Would she be able to uncover more? And is that 12 million that she found just the tip of the iceberg, or was she successful at least in stemming that here in Massachusetts?
Yeah. I know with the SNAP benefits, like, the reason that it bothers me so much. So I'm on the board of the Open Pantry, and it affects real people. Like, nobody's going to wait in line for 2 hours for 2 bags of groceries if they really didn't need it. So when the SNAP benefits got cut for everyone, like, that's what we were seeing. These are people who really need the food. And when we find fraud in SNAP benefits, then it's money that's not going to people who really need it. And that really, really bothers me. So I think that in a lot of these benefit programs, being able to find that fraud and try to get it back or however that goes is just so important because of how many people we know need it who then aren't getting it.
Yeah, and I would think most of us are people sneaking into those lines, and as you said, waiting an hour, 2 hours or whatever. Are the people sneaking in there that technically under the federal guidelines are not legally entitled to those? Probably. Or can we turn the other eye to that, look the other way to that? I think most of us are willing to, but it's the stories that you see, like the storefronts that are, they're doing $500,000 worth of business when all they sell is in food stamp business, when they're only selling lottery tickets and, maybe some sodas or whatever. This morning there was a story, and it was, ironically enough, it was Attorney General Andrea Campbell who prosecuted a former Lowell nonprofit employee for stealing housing assistance money. But this is like system, like the details of that case where the guy was depositing money directly into his accounts.
Right.
And you're like, all right, you're almost not even trying to hide the fraud, which makes you wonder how prevalent is it that people are like, all right, well, we don't have to hide it anymore. I'll just put the money straight in my bank account. And that's, I think people just want to kind of see the controls so that they know when taxpayer dollars are being used, you're actually giving money to somebody who's waiting in line at a pantry or something.
Right. Yeah. Sorry, lost my train of thought.
It happens to me.
I'm so excited we got to talk to Diana.
It happens to me all the time. All right. When we were originally scheduled to chat on Monday, before you ditched me for the auditor on Monday, I did talk a lot about some of that SNAP benefit stuff. But we had a list of stuff that was a really interesting city council meeting on Tuesday, both on the agenda. And you actually talked about some of those items. You every week now you publish your out of the running video vlog, as they call it in the biz, and you talked about some of those items, and we encourage everybody to follow Erin on Facebook, Instagram, and catch that weekly thing. We try to share it as well on InsideLowell.com. But there was a bunch of stuff on the meeting that I know you wanted to talk about. Snow removal.
Yeah.
How your neck of the woods, your neighborhood, how did the city do its job? Did the residents do their job clearing sidewalks and helping the city?
So the tough thing is, so my street, we have driveways. So the one complaint that I would have is that we didn't see curb to curb plowing, that there was a lot that they could have taken away. There was a lot of snow. I get that. I think there are areas of the city that were well taken care of. There are areas that are still kind of a mess. I thought the council meeting was very fiery. The DPW commissioner took quite a lashing.
He took a few blows.
But at the same time, there were some really good suggestions that came out of that I think Ryan Faria got up and spoke, and he had some really good, like, can you break it down in this way? And I thought that was super helpful, where it was like, in the first 4 hours of a storm, what is going to happen? And then what happens after 12 hours? What can residents expect? Because in this storm, there was no school for 2 days. Sidewalks were a mess for a couple weeks. Like, what as a resident should we expect? What are our taxpayers going to? We're paying a high price and we're about to pay more. Like, what can we expect? Because if you know what to expect, then you can't complain. You know, all right, 3 days after the storm, this is what it should look like. So I thought that was a really good layout. I thought Eric had some good points, like with the spotters in different places and watching the contracted employees. Because if you have someone just kind of running amok and not like doing the areas that they're supposed to, or doing parking lots instead of school areas, then it's waste. That's not efficient, right? So it was actually, when Eric was talking, Mayor 𝐃𝐢𝐬𝐧 was talking, it was almost like reading one of Diana DiZoglio's audits. Like, it was an efficiency audit. It's like, this is how you can do it well. So I really just hope that they took the motion back and they're going to rewrite it. And I hope that some of those points are put in there, because I do feel like the discussion was really good. It just, there was a lot of fire in between.
Well, the one thing that surprised me is, and as we were trying to get to what exactly are the procedures, I'm still not sure there is a set standard for every storm, and what must be followed. I almost get the sense, well, depending on the timing of the storm, the size of the storm, and who's available, that you kind of get what you can. And we had Councilor McDonough on yesterday, and then former Mayor Samaras, who, talking about on his days on the council, and he seemed to kind of indicate that depending on who the DPW commissioner is, they may do things differently every time. And it harkened back to the days of, Ralph Snow and even with Bernie Lynch and back, lots of heat for how they handled snow removal, and Kevin Murphy, Eileen Donahue, everyone's kind of dealt with it. But I was a little bit surprised that I'm not sure there is a set procedure, and perhaps there is time. It is time to at least have this guideline, for better or worse. This is how we're going to do it every single time, and then if there's a...
Can you imagine walking on into a job and not having a manual and not knowing like what your responsibility is, and just kind of like going with the flow. Like that's,
yeah,
it's not professional. Like you need a guide.
Right. I'm gonna say that there's probably some loose things if I had to guess, but I'd like to see them. But there should be some kind of standard that is followed, and if for some reason Paul St. Cyr leaves tomorrow, the next person who comes in has a playbook that has to be followed when that potential snow comes in on Sunday night into Monday. And, if there are things that they want to tweak in it, that's something that should be discussed. And Paul, you can always find room for improvement. I'm just wondering, like, after all these years, there's no standard. I was shocked by that there doesn't appear to be a standard that's followed. And it almost makes me wonder, what do these other towns do? Because now, and I know in Chelmsford, we kind of have a kind of a standard little thing. There's this thing that goes around and clears off everybody's sidewalks, but it doesn't really happen until 2 days, the second day or something after the storm. So I got to do the best I can, and then that thing comes anyway, whether I've done it or not. I did notice that on this storm, it took a lot more than the 2 days, which I kind of get, but it's consistent. I know that. I'm just wondering if it's consistent in Lowell. Do you see the same type of things in your neighborhood? Do other residents in Lowell, is it whether it's consistently good or consistently bad, is it in their point of view, is it consistent at least in the way it's done each and every storm?
Yeah. So I went for a run yesterday. Actually, that's when I notice it, right? It's like I go for a run, and if I can't run on the sidewalk, then I realize, oh, okay, the sidewalks aren't done. And you can tell that the sidewalks are done by the residents. The snow is starting to melt. I think it's pretty consistent, though. It's a few days at least until the roads are clear enough that you can run. Yeah, at least 4 days is what I think my experience has been before we can get back out and running.
All right. So there is more to come on that. They promised an updated and probably more and hopefully more detailed report as a result of the meeting. School bus cameras was an interesting discussion, an issue that seemed pretty simple, ultimately didn't pass because of a funding mechanism vote, and there weren't enough counselors on the floor to make the vote.
The way that I understood it is that the school bus cameras passed. That was one part.
Correct.
To put the money from that is collected through the violations into a transportation stabilization fund is what didn't pass. So now does it just go in the general fund, or because the camera part passed?
Yes.
Like they can put the cameras
that one.
up.
Yes, that one they had enough people there. But then when the discussion got to the fund that it was supposed to go in. Now all of a sudden councilors are recusing themselves. I believe Councilor Noon was not present for any of the meeting. Councilors Rourke and Robinson were not in the room either at that point. So suddenly you had not enough votes to pass it, which was really strange. The
prevailing side can do a reconsideration, right? Like, can they bring it back to revote?
I guess so. Did somebody vote no on it so that it could come back? I think it's somebody that voted no has to.
They just didn't have enough people, right?
Oh, they didn't have a. Oh, that's true. Okay, yeah. Oh, now we need a Robert's Rules expert. That seems like a no-brainer. I'm astounded by how many people. Because there were 8
people in the room. Just John Dakota. Like, he can't vote.
You're right.
And then
Sean McDonough couldn't vote. And whether Vesna knew, he wouldn't have been able to vote even had he been there, right? Because if Councilor Dakota has to excuse himself, then Councilor Noon would have to as well, I believe. Given he's got a spouse, I think, that works in the school system. Councilor Dakota has a daughter. Sean McDonough, of course, not only has a spouse, he himself works in the school district. So, that's a question for the Robert's Rules of Order thing. I got to get your thoughts on. Did you watch the podcast yesterday with Councilor McDonough?
I did.
He threw the solicitor under the bus on 2 occasions. One, saying that the solicitor was wrong on whether he can recuse himself and speak as a member of the public. And then number 2, he revealed something he claims. The solicitor regarding his ability to vote for mayor, which I had started to hear rumblings of, kind of the final couple of days before the inauguration. He acknowledged that the solicitor told him right before the inauguration, technically the first meeting, that he shouldn't vote for mayor. He's not allowed to vote for mayor. But he claims that a month earlier, he asked the solicitor if he could vote for mayor and was told, yes, he could, no problem. The insinuation being that once Councilor McDonough finally indicated who he was voting for mayor, suddenly he was told he shouldn't be able to vote for mayor. So you kind of got. We haven't heard from the solicitor yet on this. We are efforting to try to get commentary, but you don't have a he said yet, but you certainly have a he said. That's a powerful accusation that Councilor McDonough threw out there.
Yeah. I mean, if you've sat in the city council, you can cut tension with a knife.
Between the counselors, or the counselors and the solicitor, the management team, and anybody else in there?
It's just a feel that I haven't felt. And I've gone to a lot of city council meetings, and it's just a different feeling. There's been a shift in power dynamics in voting. I don't like, I'm not the solicitor. I don't know, but I just think that there's a lot going on. And there's a change in power dynamics, and it's interesting and tough to watch. I don't know.
So, and the other thing, Councilor McDonough, I was surmising by the fact that after he and the solicitor had their disagreement at the one meeting, he came back at the next meeting and started reading from 280, I think. Forgive me if I get the wrong chapter, section, whatever they are, of the general laws. But he wanted to make sure he read for everybody what he was using as his basis for being able to speak from the audience side of the room, which said to me, he's going to do this again. And as we get to school budget season, it's probably going to happen there as well.
I didn't realize that you could sit in your seat. I always thought if you were recusing yourself, you had to leave the room for the discussion because your presence being in the room could impact people's votes.
Which I believe that's how it usually had been done, or at least that I was aware it had been done. But yeah, he says it shows it in the laws that you don't have to leave there, but you do have to leave your seat if you want to speak.
Yeah.
Do you believe that that's something Councilor McDonough should continue to do, especially as we get into school budget issues, is not speak from the council chair, but speak from the public side as a citizen if he so chooses?
I mean, if the Ethics Commission says that that's your right and you're able to do it, then who are we to argue with that? They interpret the law. But I think on certain things, it certainly does influence the vote. And I think perceived ethics conflict is important too, you know?
So here's the part that I want to build on that, because the Ethics Commission is telling you he can't vote on it because as a counselor, there's an ethical thing there. So whether he's speaking as a private citizen or not, that conflict doesn't go away. And as former Mayor Samaras was trying to say yesterday in our discussion, you can't take away the fact that you're a sitting city councilor. Even though you're speaking as a citizen, it carries some weight. Now, I know the ethics department allows it in some cases, like there was the famous case of then Councilor 𝐃𝐢𝐬𝐧 speaking as a private citizen to, I believe it was the zoning board or planning board. It was over a housing project, a house lot in the Highlands. So there's a fine line there. My biggest problem with all this is, why are there no hard and fast rules? Why is it pick up the phone, you speak, I refer you to the section of the law, and then, but also as we're told, the law and the interpretation of it, the ethics of it are dependent on who picks up the phone. You could call somebody in the morning.
Twice in one day, get two different answers.
Yeah, get two. So do we really have ethics guidelines, or do we have this fake stuff? The other part that's always bothered me, the phone call. That's just put it in writing. Here's an email request in writing to the ethics board.
You can get it in writing. I got it in writing for whether or not I would be able to serve on the Board of Health, or when they were going to appoint, because there was if Belvedere got to vote, there was one ruling for state ethics, whether or not you could continue to serve on the Board of Health and the City Council. If it was a vote, like if it was an appoint, I got one answer. If it was a vote, I got a different answer. They were not the same. Like if it's a voted position, it's different than if it's appointed. So I got two separate answers depending on which way, and then they sent it to me in writing.
You asked for it to be in
Yeah.
writing. Shouldn't it be mandatory that it's in writing? Because the phone
Sure.
call thing leaves things open to the interpretation. How did you spell out the scenario? Did you omit unintentionally or intentionally a key thing that might sway things?
Right.
And that's why, again, I think this whole ethics
I think it
thing
should
needs
always
a
be in
enema.
writing. Right. It's really, because that is hard, right? Like, one thing that I said to Sean was, what if you were, like, you do work for the teachers union, right? So are you influenced by the union, right? Like, are you just, maybe unintentionally, like sometimes things just seep into your head because
We're
you
human.
work
We all
there,
have
right?
biases.
Yeah, like you have to, just a little bias by it, right? So does that impact ethics? Like, do you ask the ethics department that? Like, I think if it isn't totally laid out, and then the response you get, if you could look at the response, but you don't know what I said on the phone. So I think that part's hard.
Exactly. And again, I did ask Councilor McDonough previously. I asked him again yesterday. I'd love to get some kind of writing, both how the question was phrased and then have some kind of a response. I don't think it's going away. And based on the reaction from yesterday's podcast with Councilor McDonough, there are councilors who still are going to challenge this and try to get some kind of an ethics ruling. And hopefully they try to get it in writing so that we can all have our answer one way or the other. I'm not going to pretend I know the answer.
Yeah.
All I know is that, I found, I'll go back to the thing that kind of set off your initial interest in candidacy. Councilor Leahy at the time announcing that he was leaving to take a job with the school department. And there were all sorts of questions about, can he do that ethically? Is there a cooling off period? Blah, 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 blah. And I remember speaking to him and he told me what ethics told him. I'm like, well, can you get that in writing? I don't want to report what you say was said on a phone conversation. And he got it for me, and sure enough, he was correct. At least to put that part of it to bed. Now, people can still complain about whether the ethics laws need to be changed, but the argument that why can he do it, but Councilor Riddy Young at the time couldn't do it, that was the big battle. That was constantly being thrown at me, and I have to admit, I thought the same thing. I'm like, well, this is no different than Councilor Ong, and he not only was told no, he got a slap in the not just a slap on the wrist. He had to give up his seat. So I just think that this whole ethics thing. Ultimately, I blame the ethics department in the state for not setting real ethical rules. Then again, maybe they just don't want to, because then you have to follow those rules at all times.
It definitely needs to be updated either way. I mean, I think Councilor Scott said it, that public service usually runs in families. So you could kind of wipe out a whole board in being able to vote on things, because if you're a public servant, you were raised and value that service, right? So that happens. I mean, two out of however many councils were in the room couldn't vote on the school bus thing because they have family that are in the school system. So it needs to be updated.
And that's an important point that, Councilor Scott made, and it bears repeating. I find that children of school teachers very regularly become school teachers.
Children of nurses become nurses.
Exactly. My wife is a nurse. Her mom was you see it in the police officers. Right. You see it with firefighters. And I know of many instances in DPW workers, somebody's dad was managing gold, and his father worked for the water department, and he suddenly, he gets into public service. So you see this a lot. And the implication is that there's something untoward about it, when most of the time, there's probably something noble about it, right? Why you want to get into these fields. So you're right. The ethics rules we're in agreement. We're agreeing on too much stuff today.
I know. I'm usually here to fight you.
We have to cut this out. All right, let me see if I can get you to fight on something else. senior center executive session hasn't blown up yet.
Give me the minutes.
On the council floor, but on social media, once again yesterday, Mayor 𝐃𝐢𝐬𝐧 put out a post that it was the typical cryptic type thing about threats of lawsuits, which he mentioned the Salapoli threat of lawsuit, but you could tell he was referring to the senior center.
Yeah.
So, and then he also said, well, the minutes have been released or whatever, right? Or they haven't voted on the council floor.
They voted it out, but Michael Gary is out, so the minutes haven't come out yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
But Mayor 𝐃𝐢𝐬𝐧 is saying we can talk about him. So let's talk about him. What happened in that room over a senior center deal that I think everybody agreed it's good for the city to kind of control that whole property in some way, shape, or form, and expand it or make their services to the seniors better with however they're going to use that facility. What happened to make it so acrimonious that it needed so many executive sessions? There were at least 2 that I can think of, and now we're getting at least some cryptic grenades being lobbed, not so much behind the scenes anymore.
So I'm not a lawyer, but I look at a lot of stuff, and I just kind of like read and try to pick what I can from things. And I looked at the lease agreement that we had. So from 2000, I think it was 2001 or 2002, and it was 20 years. So after the 20 years, it was supposed to be turned back over to the city, and then that didn't happen. So I think that's why it's because you have 4 years that what was happening in those 4 years. If it wasn't given over to us, like what were we continuing the lease? Like, how do you continue a lease if you're out of that 20 years and nothing was signed and moved forward? So I imagine that there's some point of contentions there. I think that the Walgreens side of it is not part of the executive session from what I read about, like when they enter, they have that little thing at the bottom. So Walgreens still has a lease, and
yeah, I found out they're still paying the lease, even though they're not there anymore. So the landlord.
So are we going after them for a vacant storefront and stopping the tax incentives? Because we were on a mission for that before, right? Like, so we should be recouping some of that. Yeah. But if I was a landlord and they're paying me rent and there's no issues, and I'm not motivated to switch anything, right?
See, my assumption was that the city was looking to buy that, but you're right. We found out now they still don't own the senior center building there. So there's got to be a story there. Up to this point, all sides are very quiet. The landlord is a well-known gentleman in the area. Nick Saris owns a lot of properties, and I remember when Mayor 𝐃𝐢𝐬𝐧 was on here, I'm like, when he wouldn't talk about some of the details, saying executive session, I'm like, well, is the private individual, is the landowner, is he or she bound by the same privacy things, executive session rulings, and Mayor 𝐃𝐢𝐬𝐧 said no, but if they know what's good for them, they won't talk about it, which said to me, all right, there's some butting of the heads here behind the scenes. Will we find out next Tuesday? Is that the day we get these executive session minutes?
I hope so.
All right. Can we talk about, so my pet peeve about ethics rulings and them not being in writing, executive session minutes?
What's the expectation?
Are we really hearing what went on behind the scenes, or a quick little summary of what went on behind the scenes?
Right.
I was on
I want to know the voting. I want to know what was said.
We know the vote. We'll know the voting,
who
right?
was hostile in there.
Exactly. And that's, we're going in the same direction. This is bad, Aaron.
They're going to call me a Republican, and I'm not.
You should be very worried. Well, if Diana DiZoglio is a Republican, I want to wring her neck over some of her policies when she was a state rep and state senator, but I apologize. She'd kick my ass. I wouldn't wring her neck. I just yell at her. But just like I think the ethics rules need to be clear and everything spelled out, executive session, it's 2026. AI can record a meeting. You know, in the nursing field, nurses and doctors now use AI to keep their notes, their patient notes, and all this stuff. So AI can now be You can record the meeting, the executive session.
Let's do it.
And let AI transcribe it, all of it. Public records, right? Transparency. We're all for transparency. Because what I hear more often than not is all the good stuff that happened in executive session never makes those meeting minutes. So why can't we record the entire thing? We can do it with video, for Christ's sakes, right? Don't release it until it's okay, which, by the way, I think they use executive session way too often, but I'll give them the fact that they can wait until they're ready to release them. But once you release it, release it. Let's hear what everybody had to say and who's fighting with who and what the battlefield was, instead of just getting a quick little recap.
Yeah, I think we do. I don't know that we use executive session too much. I understand like the reasoning with negotiations and that type of stuff. We have a lot of collective bargaining agreements in the city, and those are things that should be in executive session. So I don't necessarily.
Now we're going to disagree. That area is the one area that I think that they should put out completely in the open, because that's you're now negotiating for the taxpayers. That's you're not negotiating against a private entity.
I guess I misspoke.
You're now negotiating against one public entity, and another public entity are fighting over how they're going to spend your tax dollars. That's what I want to see. I want to know what these unions are asking for. And conversely, if the city side, school side is being unfair in their demand, saying, hey, we're trying to take this away from you or whatever, let's put that out there. Let's shine a light on it.
Shine on. Yeah.
So we're in agreement there too.
Yeah. No, but the I get where in negotiations they need to be in executive session. So I guess for that point, I don't think they overuse it. I think what else is kind of hard though, and we do see this on the council floor, right? If everybody meets together, which this is a hard thing with ethics because the counselors are friends, right? Some of them.
The groups gathering after the meeting for dinner and drinks are smaller and smaller, but
yeah, you know what I mean? Like you need to break bread, especially after there's been like a contentious meeting. But I think when counselors walk in and the vote is decided and there's no conversation, like then it begs the question, like what conversations are happening that are before the meeting that votes were already decided. I don't think that we've seen that from this council just yet. But certainly we've seen it before. So I think people should say their position when they vote for something because it's important. It shows transparency.
Agreed. And also it's easy to get around those quorum discussions there. So I could call you, and then I could call somebody else, and then you could call somebody else, and even though the four of us never got together, we got together.
Yeah.
All right. Budget time. Depends on who you listen to. It's going to be bad. There's going to be cuts required. I think we're going to have another battle with the schools over how much they're going to get funded, which should get real fun, again, based on where Councillor McDonough is and the fact that what can and can't Councillors Dakota and Noon vote on. Let's start with ARPA-funded jobs. Yeah. How many of those jobs are gone?
I'm very worried about the library, the mobile library. That was on there.
Discussion yesterday during that podcast, yeah.
That's really hard because it helps the elders. It helps, it's a great program, and it's kind of a drop in the bucket when you look at the whole budget. But
$160,000.
Yeah, but it's on the list, and that's hard.
Is it getting usage? Is that getting a lot of use? What the bus?
Ask Lisa. I think so, though. I think elders that are homebound, that's great. You come drop the book off, and I know that they go to all the the Folk Fest and all of those different things that maybe the library wouldn't have a table or an area there for that. I just like it. It's a great program that we have here in the city, and it's on the list. So I hope we continue to have the funding.
I'd be curious how much use it actually gets. A lot of the MIS jobs were placed in there after the hack a couple of years ago, and that department expanded significantly. There were a lot of MIS jobs.
That's really the big one.
Is it? Yeah. Is it how many of those can be drawn into the general budget versus how many need to be eliminated at this point? We're beyond the hack, right? I haven't heard anything, but we've at least shored up all the damage that was done, and we're now, we're beyond needing so many folks. Do we need them full time to guard against the next one?
But so the MIS folks, are they only doing the guarding against the hack, or are they helping to update our websites and add, like, now we have a lot of dashboards that we can look at different things. Like, are they helping with that? Because if they are, then, I mean, our website was so archaic and it's come up to speed and it's great. Like, it's a lot better. We can actually find things that you're looking for and it's more organized. Those dashboards are really helpful. So I think if the service is still, like, if we're still getting a good service from it, then we can justify it. But could it be, instead of 2 full-time, could we do 1 full-time? Like, then, I think there's a better way to justify it.
Consolidation of services. There's a lot of talk about this between schools and the city side. Is there too much repetition in some of those, especially the administrative jobs, financing, treasurers, auditing, that should the city look at consolidating some of those services and saving money there? And I get that it would mean the loss of somebody's job, but we're probably looking at the loss of an MIS job, potentially teachers / paraprofessional jobs. So I don't see how we avoid job cuts this time around, but should we look at consolidation as a way to hit the upper levels a little bit more than the lower levels?
So unfortunately, the state said don't use ARPA funds for things that you have to sustain in the budget when the money is gone. And it's unfortunate, but we did that, right? So I think that the city has to own it. It's going to be tough, and there's going to be cuts that have to be made. And that's unfortunate, But yeah, I think we're going to lose some of it because we need to tighten our belts. We don't know what we're getting for federal funds, and we need to create revenue streams that aren't just the federal and state government, because if we don't and the money runs out, like, then we're in this situation. The taxpayers can't fund all of this.
So that MIS department is where I'll be watching specifically when the manager and his team unveil their budget. If as you said, those funds were not supposed to be used for something that would be recurring, did they know full well when they did use the funds for employees that they weren't going to bring these jobs back, and now we're going to see it in their budget proposal, or are they going to fight to keep them elsewhere? That's what I'll be watching very carefully there. And conversely, on the school department side, they too have. They use, from my understanding, they used an awful lot of what they call those ESSER. Was it ESSER funds that the school department called them instead of ARPA? That they had some that they used as well.
I wonder what, because I haven't really looked at all that, but I know that, so a lot of those jobs kind of have gone away just by natural attrition. So it'll be interesting to see what, based on both, because we know the city side, they put those jobs out at the last meeting, so we know, like, what's going to potentially be cut for them. But I wonder for the school side, what has naturally attritioned, what's gone just because we don't need it anymore because of COVID, or maybe someone got a different job or left and they just didn't refill it. So it'll be interesting to see the school side for sure.
All right. Last thing on my list, facilities department. Sounds like something that was going to be an easy pass in the last few months is dying a slow death, where I've had counselors who supported it tell me, that's not going to happen.
So I thought that was kind of a wild move, that the motion, so they put in the motion to have it go to a home rule petition and to draft an ordinance of a request for a home rule petition, and then skipped a step. Like, it didn't come back as a draft, it came back right as a vote. But in that meeting, there were supposed to be 3 things that were going to happen. Like, Manager Golden was going to talk to Superintendent Liam Skinner, and then the the mayor was going to meet with the school committee to kind of talk to them about their feelings about it. And then if those two, then they would have the draft come back. But it didn't come back as a draft. It came back as a vote. So it really kind of, I mean, if I was on the school committee, I would be so stymied. Like, even though they've talked about a centralized facility department before, but it just gave bad feels, right? Like, if I was on the school committee, I'd be so stymied by that. Like, oh, you're just going to say, forget it, you don't want to talk to us, and just go right straight to the state? Like, that's awful. And I don't think that was any of the counselors' intent, but it came back and skipped a step. So that's kind of, I don't know.
Well, I viewed the making of the motion as trying to light a fire under the school committee and the school department. Otherwise, why make that motion? You don't need the home rule petition to schedule meetings between the manager and the superintendent, or the city council and the school committee, and have their facilities departments there get together. So there was no need for the home rule petition. As I read it, I thought what Councilor Robinson was saying, hey, enough of this. We're going on year 4 of this. Either we're going to do something, or we're going to see if we can do it ourselves. So,
but in the conversation, it got sussed out that it was like, let's try these two things first, and then at a like last ditch, then we can look at the state for help. But it was just, I think the timing of it, I don't know. I'd be stymied if I was a school committee member.
They were upset.
Yeah.
Multiple ones that I have spoken to, and I also watched that meeting. They were upset about it. There's now this talk about potential privatization of custodians, at least for one shift, if not all, or whatever. At the very least, don't all these entities have a duty to the taxpayers and in what's going to be a tough budget time, to at least sit down and look at ways that we can do it better? I think everybody's in agreement. The school facilities need a better plan, just like snow removal, right? We're all in agreement. Snow removal, we need to do things better. I think they're all in agreement that the schools need to be, there needs to be better systems in place and better oversight. And yet, again, it seems to me like it's just going to die, because it becomes a really politically challenging thing once you start getting into union discussions and potential job losses or job changes and who's supervising who and whatnot. I mean, I kind of got lost. I had to reread Jerry Nutter's Sunday Notes column twice to try to get the like, okay, so who's really, is it the principals, or is it Ricky Underwood, the facilities boss over there in the schools? And to this moment, I'm not really sure. I think the facilities guys are supposed to hand out the discipline, but ultimately it's the principals who are supposed to impose it. I'm not sure how it's supposed to work yet.
And it should be laid out there, because that's what progressive discipline is, right? Like, I work for a union, and I know if I don't follow an SOP or I don't do my job, and my boss says, hey, Erin, you didn't do this. And I said, oh, okay. And she would say, well, here's a warning. And then the next time you do it, here's a suspension. And then the next time you do it, you're walking out. It should be that clear. Like, it should be, this is who's in charge, and this is what progressive discipline looks like. You should also have exactly what your job responsibilities are, right? So I know when I go to work, this is what my job responsibilities are, and this is what the policies are. So it should be incredibly clear, and it's not. It's not clear. Even, like, I think I've said this before, even as a Board of Health member, it was really hard for us to figure out who's responsible for changing the fire extinguishers in the schools, who's responsible for cleaning the hood in the kitchen, who's responsible for, any number of things in the schools. It gets murky, and it's not always clear. And I think that clearing it up will help the taxpayer to save money, because when people know what to expect and what their job is, then that's the level they'll perform to.
Interesting. Cleaning the hood, I would assume, would be a private, or maybe on a daily basis, but on the there's inspections and regular cleanings that need to take place. I would assume those are private contractors. Same with the fire.
So we rent out our
stuff?
kitchens to Airmark, but we have custodians who clean too. Like, what area did they clean? What area does the kitchen clean? Who pays for it? I'm telling you,
it's not spelled out.
I have looked through contracts and all the things. It's now spelled out, and now we understand it. But at one point, it was not. So just if you don't know what your expectations are, then how can you have that progressive discipline? How are we expecting workers to know what to do if it isn't laid out for them? And I think that's.
I would hope emptying the trash barrels is laid out clearly, but you know, I think when all is said and done, I'm realizing even more and more every day that we kind of think this government is like a machine that operates and it's on autopilot and Yes. I'm starting to wonder how much of it is just wing it and just try to get it done, and how much is really, all right, this is the procedure. Again, for better or worse, this is the procedure, and we're going to follow it. And if you want to, change it, go ahead, but don't try to get me in trouble or discipline me for not doing my job when you haven't spelled it out. It's an interesting point.
Yeah. Everybody should have how can you hold someone responsible for something if we don't even know who the boss is, right? Like, is it the principal? Is it is it Ricky Underwood? Like, the general, like, I don't know. Who's responsible? So who's holding the people accountable?
Darren says it's the principals.
Okay.
But the principal's not overseeing the 10 p.m.
But 7 to 3, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Or even longer than that. But at the same time, like, so if the principal comes in at 7 in the morning and things aren't done, I don't know.
And does it really make sense to have the man or the woman who's responsible for the academic well-being and safety of these students to really have to worry about whether the janitor emptied a trash barrel or wiped a counter or whatever? Like, but Jerry says it's kind of spelled out like that in the.
But at the end of the day,
general laws.
Our buildings are owned by the city, and they're an asset. It's asset protection. We need to make sure that our buildings are up to code, that the heat is working, that our buildings are pristine. Like, that's what we need. So whatever gets us to there, right now it doesn't seem to be working. So if change is what helps and is going to keep our buildings in good condition so that we're not paying unbelievable money in taxes to renovate and do all these things, then I'm for that. Let's move it along.
And that's my upset, because the way it's set up now, they're the city's buildings, but technically the schools are responsible for how they're cleaned and so much of the regular basic maintenance of it that joint facilities department makes so much sense. And Erin, I think it's dead on arrival.
I know.
So.
Well, always next time.
There's always next time. All right. There'll always be a next time for you here. You're welcome to come back regularly. Do I have to bring the auditor on to get you to come back, though?
No, I was going to come Monday, but then that was a better deal.
You got a better. I know. The prettier girl showed up, so you decided to take her to the prom instead of me. I get it. Or the more handsome guy, whatever the case may be. Anyway, thank you. Good discussion. Lots of good stuff there. Always a pleasure. And again, out of the running every week on Erin Gendron.
Try to be every week, yeah.
All right. On your Facebook page and on your Instagram.
That's right.
Check it on out and watch for more of Erin here on Inside Lowell. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you to Erin. Thank you for tuning into today's Daily Pulse. Another one of these lengthy Daily Pulses, but good stuff. And again, we got the auditor on here. So much more we could have talked to her about. We'll get her on again. Tomorrow we're going live, the Friday live edition of the Daily Pulse, 10 a.m. I'll have the fabulous Lindsay here. The Pod Squad had to ditch us. They've got other things on their agenda, but we'll get folks to come in here. If not, Lindsay and I will harass you from 10 to 11 live. So it's the show, the Daily Pulse, the show that keeps its finger on the pulse of Lowell and the world around it. Till next time, everybody stay safe. Enjoy what's going to be a beautiful day today in between kind of a mess of storms that are potentially coming, missing us, hitting us. Who the hell knows? We will see you either way. We'll see you on the other side.